Now coming back to our para here. To these two, the Gita, developing the thought of other passages in the Upanishads, adds yet another, the Supreme, the Purushottama, the highest Purusha, whose greatness all this creation is. Thus there are three: the Kshara, the Akshara, the Uttama. Kshara, the mobile, the mutable, is nature, Svabhava. It is the various becoming of the soul. The Purusha here is the multiplicity of the being. It is the Purusha multiple, not apart from, but in Prakriti. So this is what I explained, and you should see the word not apart from, but in Prakriti. So this Kshara Purusha, the mutable, the mobile, is in Prakriti, that means in you and me and all the living beings. So that is how he enjoys, he participates, he is involved. The other one which we said is the Akshara, the immobile, the immutable, is a silent and inactive self. It is the unity of the divine being, witness of nature, but not involved in its movement. It is the inactive Purusha, free from Prakriti and her works. So this is the one on the higher branch. That means he is the witness Purusha within us, again within us, but he is inactive. And then there is the Uttama. The Uttama is the Lord, the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Self, who possesses both the immutable unity and the mobile multiplicity. This is the explanation that we should have now, that there are these two birds, but there is no higher bird. It's not, Uttama is not the bird. Uttama is the tree itself. Purushottama is the entire tree, including the two birds here. This is the Purushottama. That means he is the Purushottama, the Brahman, who has these two wings, or these two characteristics of Kshara and Akshara. So you see, so he is beyond the both, and yet he is both. So one aspect, say one wing of his aspect enters nature, and the other wing and the other aspect stays beyond nature. But it is he who is holding both the Kshara and the Akshara. So it is this way that the Gita brings in the aspect of the Uttama Purusha or the Purushottama, while yet having these two. Well, it's not given here right in this para, but while we are at it, I may add one or two sentences here, because it would be relevant to our life. See, what happens here is, when we have the Akshara and the Kshara, these two Purushas, and there is the Purushottama. Why the Gita brings in these three aspects is very interesting. Now those who follow the Karma Yoga follow the Kshara Purusha. That means those who are involved in the world, for whom the work or the karma is important, for whom there is a mutability, and those who want to be with the world, within the world, those are the karma yogins. But then there is the jnana yogi who does this Raja Yoga, practices meditation, wants to become aloof, and as we have seen in Sankhya and Yoga, in the yoga system, where do you go? You go into the Samadhi. The Samadhi means aloofness, being away from the world. So these people, they attain the Akshara Purusha because Akshara is the immobile. And the Akshara is the mobile. So you see that we have a distinct divinity depending on which path you follow. So normally those who do not know this kind of a discrimination in philosophy, they'll say all is God, everything is divine. That is unphilosophic. That's for the layman. But those of us who are bit into philosophy, it's interesting to see that the Gita gives us distinct divinities, wherein the three different parts of the Gita, they have a kind of an aim. So having said that, you can see now the Purushottama is meant for the Bhakti Yoga. So we have Bhakti, Jnana and Karma. So we have Kshara, Akshara and Purushottama. This was perhaps, I may not be right, but as far as my understanding goes, the need for the Gita to bring about these three distinct differences between the Purushas. Well, that's on the practical level. But on the philosophical level, this was already there prior to the Gita. So we should not say that Gita has brought about this discrimination. But surely the Gita has linked it with the three paths. In the Upanishads, when this bird image is given, I don't remember, maybe it is Katha Upanishad, Katha or Kena, or is it Manduka? Mundaka Upanishad, yeah. In the Mundaka Upanishad, so it is there prior to the Gita, but applied in the Gita in this manner to the three paths of yoga, the triple path as we say. So what Sri Aurobindo and the Gita would argue is that if you concentrate only on the Akshara Purusha, then you are bound to go beyond this world and be a recluse and ascetic. If you are only after the Kshara Purusha, you will be constantly in ignorance. That means you would be involved so much into this world that you will not see beyond. So it is best to be involved with the Purushottama. There you can be in the world and away from the world, detached from the world. So that is why the Purushottama is given the position of the Uttama Purusha, the highest Purusha. And therefore, you see, so many consequential things are coming about. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga comes, if not central, but very, very important. You see, towards the end, I forgot to bring my book today, the Bhagavad Gita. Does anyone have this Gita? In the end, we have these verses. Sanskrit verses are there? Yeah. This is verse 65 and chapter 18. Verse 64, he says, further here the most secret, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, the most secret, he would call it Sarva Guhyatamam, the supreme word that I shall speak to thee. Beloved art thou intimately of me, therefore will I speak for thy good. You see, now he's going to tell you the Uttama secret. He says, Sarva Guhyatamam. Sarva, the most secret of all. What is it? He says, Manmana bhava madbhakta madhyaji mam namaskuru. This is my most favorite verse. Extremely powerful. Become my-minded, my lover and adorer, a sacrificer to me. Bow thyself to me thou shalt come. This is my pledge and promise to thee, for dear art thou to me. Imagine this is coming in chapter 18, and this is the last chapter, and as you know there are 78 verses, slokas in this, and out of which 65, the 65th one is this verse. So the greatest secret of the Gita is given in the last 65th chapter, verse of chapter 18. So you can see the importance that the Lord Krishna gives to this. That's why he calls it the greatest secret. You see, before that, the first secret was about the soul. The second secret is about the three Purushas and the two natures. Third secret, the greatest and the most intensest one is become my-minded, manmana bhava madbhakta madhyaji mam namaskuru. My-minded, my lover and my adorer. And a sacrificer to me, bow thyself to me thou shalt come. That's the last message. And it's only after this he would say, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Abandon all dharmas and take refuge in me alone. And then he would say, next verse, never is this to be spoken to thee, spoken by thee, to one without ascesis, not to one that is not devoted, and not to him who does no service, nor yet to him who despises and belittles me, lodged in the human body. So you see Sri Krishna's warning, 67th verse, chapter 8, that do not speak about the Gita to those who despise me. Me is not Krishna. It is not a religious me. It is the Lord within. If somebody does not believe in me, that the divine is within, who doubts it, who is skeptical about it, he says, don't tell him the secret of the Gita. What all I have told you, it is, tells Arjuna, don't repeat. Or to one who has no ascesis and who is not devoted, and not to him who does no service. However, so this is he says, he who with the highest devotion for me shall declare the supreme secret among my devotees, without doubt he shall come to me. This is again another side. To see the Gita is read, spoken of, to the devotees. So if somebody does it, then without doubt he shall come to me. Maybe that is the motive why I am doing the essays on the Gita. Without doubt I should like to go to him. Well, jokes apart, this is why the Purushottama is there. To be my-minded, my lover and admirer. Thank you. And this he brings in. Pardon me? And Sri Aurobindo. Yeah, because as I said in the parenthesis, Sri Aurobindo himself is writing, to me means the inner divine. And we believe the mother to be the inner divine within. So it applies the same way to us. In fact, this verse, I enjoy greatly talking about this, because single words, manmana, my-minded, my beloved, my adorer, bow down to me. How will you become my-minded, my adorer, my lover? You see, everything is there in that single words. All the triple path is there. You cannot be my-minded means what? You have to be constantly remembering the divine. So then only your mind will be in consonance, in tune with him. Obviously it means you have to be constantly remembering and offer. And how will you become the adorer? Because you will be constantly thinking of him. That's what the mother really tells us, remember and offer. So this remembrance is the my-mindedness. My adorer, Bhakti bhav comes in. One is the jnana, the other is the bhakti. And then bow down to me, that means sacrifice to me, that is the works. So it's a marvelous mantra, this verse, wherein that entire triple path is taken to a climax, because the Lord says, me, that you will come to me. It's such a personal note in that, It is not that you will reach the divine, you will reach Godhead and you will be. Then it says, doubt it not. Do not have any kind of a doubt that it will not happen. So this entire Gita of the yoga is in that single verse. And very powerful. Especially in Sanskrit it is very powerful. In English it loses a bit of its strength, because that manmana bhava mad bhakta madhyaji, all the time the my, the me, the my, the me is extremely powerful. Now coming back to this para here, this is where I started telling you about the Uttama Purusha and the effects of the other two Purushas. This idea of the Purushottama, though continually implied in the Upanishads, is disengaged and definitely brought out by the Gita and has exercised a powerful influence on the later development of the Indian religious consciousness. Obviously, the word Purushottama, though continually implied in the Upanishads, like we have the Brahman, is disengaged and definitely brought out by the Gita. And you see now, in our Indian religion, whenever we speak of devotion, we don't speak of Brahman. We always speak of Purushottam. You see how it has influenced our thinking. We don't have any devotional songs to Brahman. We have only to the Purushottama, or to Sri Krishna, or to Sri Rama, whatever. But not for Brahman. Because Brahman is the philosophic term for the supreme reality. But when it comes to the individual human link, my devotion is attuned with Purushottama. So he says it has had a tremendous effect on the later development of the Indian religious consciousness. It is the foundation of the highest bhakti yoga, which claims to exceed the rigid definitions of monistic philosophy. It is at the back of the philosophy of the devotional Puranas. Last para. The Gita is not content either to abide within the Sankhya analysis of Prakriti, for that makes room only for the ego sense and not for the multiple Purusha, which is there not a part of Prakriti but separate from her. The Gita affirms on the contrary that the Lord by his nature becomes the Jiva. How is that possible, since there are only 24 principles of the cosmic energy and no others? Well, here the word that I was looking for has come, so maybe we will explain that. The word that I was looking for is this. The Gita affirms on the contrary that the Lord by his nature becomes the Jiva. And down the line, down the para, you will see, I skip one line, I'll come back to that later. But it says, this is only the lower Prakriti of the three modes, the inconscient, the apparent. There is a higher, a supreme, a conscient and divine nature. Now this is where the whole synthesis comes into picture. Maybe now we can draw a whole synthesis together. We have now the Purushottama, and we have the Akshara Purusha and the Kshara. So these are the three Purushas. And we have seen their role and their importance. Now Purushottama has two natures. the higher and the lower. What we call the para prakriti and the apara prakriti. Now this distinction is of great importance. I'm telling you this, then only we'll understand the sentence that we are reading. That we have two natures, the higher and the lower, the para prakriti and the apara prakriti. Now this lower prakriti is what we call the normal prakriti in ignorance. Prakriti in ignorance, we can further say, this is what Sankhya says about this 23 evolutes. What we said yesterday, that Prakriti has this evolutes. So did this Prakriti. The higher Prakriti, the para Prakriti, is something different. Although the Gita does not explain much this para Prakriti, but there is a sentence here which may give us a hint. The higher, supreme, a conscient and divine nature, and it is that which has become the individual jiva, the soul. Now here comes out the jiva. Now what are these jivas? I'm sure although I declared that you can do PhD in philosophy with Sakar, after these lessons nobody would come to philosophy. It's so complex, especially the Indian one, I suppose. Well, if you don't know Indian philosophy, well, you will be missing it, I might say, tell you that. So interesting. Well, it may seem a little confusing, but once you know a little bit, you will see how very wonderful thought structure it has got. Because you see, unlike other philosophies which just go by very vague terms of divine and supreme and reality, and they club in everything into this one single word. But Indian philosophers, they went into the minutest details. They did not just club everything into the divine and say, hey, all is God, all is Brahman. That is one of the things why Aurobindo took so much trouble to write the Life Divine. To really analyze philosophical thought to this extreme point. So here we see the question of the apara prakriti giving us the 23 evolutes or 24, which as we have seen happens in this Sankhya philosophy. Okay, fine, we agree with that. Now we have this question of the jiva. Now what is this jiva? And that is where we have to concentrate. I do not know if any one of you found the answer from Sri Aurobindo regarding that multiple Purushas. That is the answer, the jiva. Well, now I'll tie up what it is. I'll come back to this diagram, but for the present, I'd like to explain to you something more from Sri Aurobindo, then it will be easier. In Sri Aurobindo, we have the supreme reality. We call this normally Sat, Chit and Ananda. Alright? Then the Satchidananda it is when it starts manifestation, with the very first step of manifestation, it is called a different name. Because it becomes now what was static, at rest, it becomes dynamic. The moment there is a dynamis comes into picture, we have a different term. And that term is called the supermind. So in a way, supermind is nothing but Satchitananda in action. So when Satchidananda withdraws and is at the static level, we call him Satchidananda. But the moment the manifestation begins, we say he is Satchidananda. The second step of this manifestation, we call him over mind. Third step, we call it intuitive mind. Fourth step, etc., etc. The supermind is Satchidananda in action, if you want to put it that way. And it is this supermind which is also called a higher nature. Higher nature. Because below the mind, or with the mind and starting with the mind and below, is called the lower nature. In Sri Aurobindo, we have these two hemispheres, what we call the higher hemisphere and the lower hemisphere. Lower hemisphere begins with mind and down, mind, vital, physical, subconscious, etc. The higher hemisphere begins with supermind at above. That means Sat and Chit and Ananda Lokas. So, what my intention is to bring about is to say that the supermind is this higher nature, starting with supermind. And what the Gita calls Paraprakriti is this. That is why I started telling you that the Gita does not give you a description of what is Paraprakriti, but there is a mention of Paraprakriti which means the nature of the supermind. So there is a glimpse of the supermind even in the Bhagavad Gita. That's what I want to conclude with. That do not think that the Lord Krishna did not tell about the supermind, but he just gave it a hint saying it's higher nature of the divine. And he leaves it at that. He leaves it at that, but he comes back centuries later to Alipur jail and tells Mr. Ghosh there, I have said only Paraprakriti, now you go and tell the world what it means. So the secret has been passed on, and it is Sri Aurobindo who now expands this thought of Paraprakriti. So that is the interesting point, that this higher nature and this higher nature, both in Sri Aurobindo and the Gita, are similar. Of course, similar, I am saying, not the same. Now, that is the first part. That's why I use the word, what is the lower nature and higher nature in Sri Aurobindonian terms is this. Maybe it becomes clearer to you, because you are more attuned to Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. Now, coming to the next word, Jiva. Now, when there is this supramental manifestation or supermind consciousness, from there is a multiplicity, what we call the individualized divine, which is the Jiva. One, to repeat, what is the Jiva? Jiva is the individualized divine soul which is eternal, but which does not come into manifestation. It is beyond manifestation. Please remember, I am trying to distinguish this, that the Jiva is beyond manifestation, and it sends its delegate called the Jivatman or called the Atman into manifestation. You see, these are, today we may think it to be complicated, but you must imagine that this philosophy, this vision that was given in the Upanishads and the Vedas has been much debated upon. Indian scholars and philosophers just did not leave it like that. Hundreds of years of debating, questioning, pro and con, what happens to this, what happens to that, like you have questioned Sankhya. So every concept has been much questioned, debated upon, and this vision, these intuitions have stood the test of time for centuries together. So that is why Indian philosophy is so complex in a way, Because it has absorbed such multi-dimensional attitudes. And it has absorbed answers to all these multidimensional problems. You see, in religion it is so easy, God created the world, now shut up, He knows everything, I don't know. As one poet, he had written a great poem, and when the critics came and said, you have written a lovely poem, can you explain it? He said, only now God knows about it. It was God who wrote the poem and I don't know anything about it. You can simplify saying that I didn't write it, God wrote it, so I don't know anything about the poem. The Indian philosophy cannot be said, no, it is God who creates the world, so all these difficulties of philosophy we don't discuss. No, on the contrary, they took up all these aspects. And that is one of the reasons why, again, yesterday another gentleman was telling somebody's friend here, that tallest American who had come. He said, oh, I started reading the Life Divine and such winding sentences and it's so difficult. And the mother says, obviously it is a winding sentence, it's a long sentence and very difficult because it is a kind of an over-mental view of things. A mental sentence would be subject, object, verb. A simple thing and you would say, oh, it's a lovely sentence, I am going home, finish. Simple thing, we all understand. But an over-mental sentence, it really captures the meaning of so many dimensions of thought. And it has to have the wholeness and the unity and the complexity. And how do you think English language is prepared for this heavy over-mental thought? Till now the English was prepared for the mental thought. Maybe a kind of a higher mental thought also. But it has never been prepared for taking over mental consciousness. So when Aurobindo brings in, the language kind of is squeezed. It strains under big weight of the thought. So Mother explains, it is winding because he did not want to give simple, intellectual, mental, rational ideas to feed you and me. So in order to understand him, we have to go higher in our mental consciousness. Because the higher we go, the thought becomes more complex and intense. So friends, it is obviously Aurobindo's sentences are winding, but not for the heck of it or just because he was a British student and wanted to show off his language. That's why each sentence has so many ideas, exactly like the over-mental consciousness. In the overmind, when we say there are all these religions, you say, okay, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, this, that. But now if you go to Hinduism, there are 1,000 things you can say. If you go to Islam, you can say another 1,000 things. So similarly, Aurobindo's language, each line, each word can be said into 1,000 words again. That is the beauty of the language and the impact and the compactness of that. So now coming back to this question of the Jiva. So the Jiva is the individual divine who is unmanifest. And it is this individual divine who sends a delegate called the soul into manifestation. I'm telling you all this not because I want to tell you about the soul and the jiva, but you remember we are still discussing the question from yesterday. Sankhya said there are many Purushas, Vedanta says there is only one Purusha. And yet there is this question of if one soul gets liberated, how about the other souls? So in Vedanta, how do we answer this? There is this jiva, individualized jivas, and beyond which is that one, what we said, maybe we can now come back to this term, there's one Purushottama. So Purushottama is one, the Supreme, but he splits into this innumerable individual jivas. And these infinite number of jivas give birth to infinite number of souls in manifestation. So, if one soul gets liberated, goes back into jiva, the other souls can still be in this world, suffering and going and doing their great journey. So what Sankhya could not solve, Vedanta solves. So here we hold one Purusha, many souls, and even if single soul goes back to his jiva, nothing happens to other Purushas, and then nothing happens to the one, he remains the same, the jivas remain the same. Only one by one, maybe, we are getting back into salvation, into liberation, whatever you want to call it. So this is the answer that we get both in the Vedas, Vedanta, and in Sri Aurobindo. So this is what Sankhya could not catch. And that is why we have this problem of the single Purusha and the multiple Purushas. Now I have given you this entire picture. Now let us see the para. You will be able to understand it now, because otherwise there are so many ideas that were dropped in here. I have to tie them up in this manner. Now the Gita affirms on the contrary that the Lord by his nature becomes the jiva. Now you understand. By his higher nature becomes the jiva. How is that possible? Since there are only 24 principles of the cosmic energy and no others. Well, we have written the word 23 evolutes, but as we said yesterday, if you add Prakriti, it becomes 24 evolutes. So, the question is, how could there be anything more apart from the 24? Because if you say there is a jiva, now where do you place the jiva? See, it's a very fine question. Here we have 24, here we have Prakriti and Purusha and Prakriti. So if you say Purusha becomes Jiva, where does it go? Is it a 25th one, 26th one? So that becomes a problem. So sure, Lord Krishna says, yes, says the divine teacher in effect, that it is a perfectly valid account for the apparent operations of the cosmic Prakriti with its three gunas and the relation attributed to Prakriti, Purusha and Prakriti. There is also quite valid and of great use for the practical purposes of the involution and the withdrawal. You see, it's practical for withdrawal, what I explained now. So, if we have this structure, that is what we said, Purusha and Prakriti and its 24 evolutes. Now we said here there is a jiva. So jiva does not fall into this parameter at all. It falls above here. So it goes beyond what Sankhya could even imagine. So the jiva doesn't fall here in the 24 evolutes because jiva is beyond the Purusha itself. So these are the Purushas, plural, what we call the souls. So now there is the synthesis. Sankhya in fact tells you of the Purushas, that means of the souls. Then beyond these Purushas is the Jiva or Jivas, and beyond the Jiva is the Purushottama. So what we see is only this part of in Sankhya, but what is beyond the Purushas is given in the philosophy of Vedanta. So now you get the full picture. Vedanta is the beginning, and then from this lower level, Sankhya takes over. So we get a beautiful full picture once we understand it in this way. But this is only the lower Prakriti of the three modes, the inconscient, the apparent. There is a higher a supreme, a constant and divine nature, and it is that which has become the individual soul, the jiva. Now you understand that. It is a lower nature, each being appears as the ego. In the lower nature it must be, In the lower nature, each being appears as the ego. In the higher, he is the individual Purusha. In other words, multiplicity is part of the spiritual nature of the One. This is the answer, if you can recollect, to that question saying, how did multiplicity come about from the One? Because we said One is indivisible. The one Brahman cannot be changed, cannot change. Then Vedanta and Sri Aurobindo would say, well, obviously we are not saying Brahman is changing. What is already implicit as a potential is only coming out. You see, the simple theory that Vedanta and Sri Aurobindo follow is, what is not there implicit cannot come out explicit. If anything has to manifest, it must have a pre-existence. So if many has come about in this as this world, it only means the many are pre-existent in the Brahman or in Satchidananda. So there are two levels of manifestation, and non-manifestation and manifestation. Non-manifestation means what? Simple energy at rest. A simple word, you don't have to go too much into philosophy. When energy is at rest, you call it unmanifest. When energy is released, you call it manifestation. So here, energy, it has the potential of the multiplicity. And with the release of energy, the multiplicity has come about. So, Sri Aurobindo would say, we are not going against the Vedanta to say that one has become. Become means not split. You know, like I have a single body. You can see me as one body. But within the body I have so many millions of cells, blood cells. The multiplicity is already there within me. But I am not splitting. It is part of me. And that multiplicity makes me. You see, if I take away the millions of blood cells, this singleness is lost. So similarly, the manyness, the multiplicity is the body, is the unmanifest body of the Supreme. So here he answers very quietly, this individual soul is myself. In the creation, it is partial manifestation of me. Mamaiva amsha. So this soul, what we have seen, the Purushas, the soul, Lord Krishna says, is myself. So now we see that the Lord Krishna is the immanent divine, the transcendent divine also. So he says, it's me, it is mamaiva amsha, it's my own part, my own amsha, is myself. And it possesses all my powers. So Atman has the same nature as the Brahman. So said the Vedanta. And Shankara accepts this very well. Because the Atman is like the ray of the sun. And the ray of the sun and the sun are absolutely of the same nature. They have no difference at all. The only difference between the ray of nature and ray of the sun and sun is of the power, the potential. Not the nature is same, but the power of the full sun and the power of the ray of the sun, they differ. And that's the only difference between Atman and Brahman. So he says, it possesses all my powers, it is witness, giver of the sanction, upholder, knower, Lord. Power in the sense of character here. It descends into the lower nature and thinks itself bound by action. So to enjoy the lower being. It can draw back and know itself as the passive Purusha, free from all action. It can rise above the three gunas and liberated from the bondage of action, yet possess action, even as I do myself, and by adoration of the Purushottama and union with him, it can enjoy wholly its divine nature. And so here, Lord Krishna is telling that you see, in one verse he would say, you see, I have nothing to gain from action in the world. And yet if I were to stop for a split second from acting, the world and the universe would collapse. So he is sustaining, he is the upholder of this world, and yet not for any personal motivation. So he says human beings can also be the same and act in the same way. That is where he says desireless action, nishkama karma. All these things can come because he says, my nature is that, so can be your nature. Because basically I am within you. And that's what he says, that so enjoy the lower being and also be the passive Purusha. It can rise above the three gunas, etc. Now to conclude, such is the analysis, not confining itself to the apparent cosmic process, but penetrating into the occult secrets of superconscious nature, Uttamam Rahasyam, by which the Gita founds its synthesis of Vedanta, Sankhya and Yoga. Its synthesis of knowledge, works and devotion. By the pure Sankhya alone, the combining of works and liberation is contradictory and impossible. By pure monism alone, the permanent continuation of works as a part of yoga and the indulgence of devotion after perfect knowledge and liberation and union are attained become impossible, or at least irrational and odious. The Sankhya knowledge of the Gita dissipates and the yoga system of the Gita triumphs over all these obstacles. Well, that is what we are going to see in the next chapter, Sankhya, Yoga and Vedanta. That is how these three make a perfect synthesis. You see, we have seen yoga refers to your Jnana Yoga or Raja Yoga. Then Sankhya will refer to the works, the action in the world. And Vedanta, with its Purushottama, the one single Brahman or Purushottama, would refer to your Bhakti Yoga. So he says each one of them by themselves are incomplete perhaps, but put together they make a wonderful synthesis. And it is that synthesis which is going to be explained pretty much at length in the next chapter. And then after that he will take up one by one the yoga of intelligent will, of the buddhi, sacrifice, Lord of the sacrifice, etc., etc. We will see in our next session in August. We hope to cover two more chapters, chapter 9 and 10. So for the present, I think we have done quite much in detail, and quite a complex philosophy it was. But as I keep telling, people think, oh, Bhagavad Gita, I read it every day. I know it, I have read it many times. But people should read the essays on the Gita to see that what is the basic philosophy. It is not just enough to say, the chapter 11 is my favorite one when I see the Lord Krishna coming in his form, etc. That is not the end. And the whole of this essays on the Gita is a great psychological approach to the Bhagavad Gita. And then we understand how deep it is, and at the same time for some of the newcomers to Sri Aurobindo's reading, I recommend the essays on the Gita. Because that forms a nice bridge between the old and the new. So many of the Indians, they say, yes, Bhagavad Gita, at least I know. Some people might have heard about it, but some people have come to know about it. So, but if you want to read the Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, read the essays. It is the best book for bridging the ancient thought with the future thought. Well, yes, I think we'll come to the end of that.